So a powerful retreat leader is not afraid to speak the truth, which is, you didn't answer my question, and I usually say it like that with like a playful tone, depending on the person. You're not being confrontational about it, but you're speaking your truth, or sometimes it might look like, they're giving you a whole story of an answer, and it might look like, I don't believe you. I know it feels like that's true, but I think there's something deeper. So don't be afraid to challenge when the ego is giving a response. It's Retreat and Grow Rich, the podcast. I'm Darla Ledoux, best-selling author, coach, and retreat leader, and I'm on a mission to normalize transformation on the planet, one intimate retreat at a time. This show's dedicated to the coaches, consultants, healers, leaders, and light workers who are here to hold space for the truth that transforms lives and get paid for it. Expert retreat and business tips, strategies, stories, and magic. It's your weekly mini retreat delivered right to your ears. Let's do this. Hello, welcome to Retreat and Grow Rich podcast episode 13. Lucky number 13. I was born on a 13th, so it is one of my favorite numbers. I'm Darla Ledoux. I am the founder of Aligned Entrepreneurs and, of course, the host of your podcast and author of Retreat and Grow Rich, best-selling book on Amazon. And I am here to talk with you today about an interesting topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is why a powerful retreat coach is not always liked. Okay, so we're going to get into the really truth of the matter, which is to be a really powerful coach and hold the space that you want to hold for your clients to see truth and create transformation in their life, in their health, in their relationship, in their business, in their career, whatever area you focus on. You have to be able to hold space for that truth. And sometimes that truth isn't always what your client wants to hear. Today's podcast is inspired by a text I received earlier today, which was from a client who gratefully chose to reach out and let me know that she was in a place of retreating. Not retreating like on a tropical island, but retreating from the goals she had set and the commitments she had made for herself. So she outed herself, which is amazing. And I was able to hold her to the commitment that she had created with me in our last conversation. And specifically, the commitment was to going live on Facebook. So rather than withdrawing when stressed, her goal and her awareness of how she operates is, for her, the only way out is through, which is true for a lot of us. And rather than withdrawing, to go be seen, go get visible. She's right in the midst of this visibility breakthrough and really owning a whole different message and that feels bold and feels risky. And so being seen is something that her soul wants in this new way. But her ego is going, unsafe, no, find a way to get stressed, find a reason not to do it because you're not at your best, you don't feel great, like all the reasons, right? So I simply texted her a quick, have you gone live yet? Right? And the text that I got back, which this is not the first time I've received a text like this, simply read, I'm finding the exact text so I can get it right. I so love hate you right now. So that was the text I received. And my response was perfect. So my question is, when your client love hates you, or maybe just flat out hates you in a moment, can you be okay with that? Can you be okay with that? So first of all, let's talk a little bit about why this happens, because you don't want to be someone who is willing to receive abuse, okay? You don't want clients who are lashing out, having inappropriate boundaries, trying to manipulate you into letting them off the hook and things like that. So I'm not talking about being a space for clients to be abusive. Okay. And I'm going to share some principles in this podcast that will really help you to ensure you're not a space for that. And here's the thing that's happening when this happens, when it's, someone in the midst of a transformation that they're actually committed to having, but they're bumping up against some resistance. What happens is you, as the coach or the retreat leader, and we'll talk about how this plays out in live retreats in a minute, you are seeing, interacting with, and speaking to the highest version of your client. Okay, so you're not in their story, and this is because you've done your own work, right? Hopefully you're in a place 90% of the time where you're interacting with their highest version of themselves. So sometimes when you're interacting with them at that level and they can't see themselves in that way, their ego will get triggered. Their ego will get upset and want to kick and scream and go, but I can't do that Facebook Live right now because I've been crying and my eyes are puffy, or I'm, whatever the reason is, right? And their ego may just want to fight for their smallness. Their ego is in resistance to the transformation, even if their soul might be in commitment to the transformation. Now, in this example that I gave, that's all I said was, have you gone live yet? Right? I received that back. I heard it. I said, I got it. You love, hate me. Great. Perfect. And then she took the action, right? I said, I'm okay with love, hate. She said, thanks. I know, hearts and whatnot. And then she took the action and then thanked me and said, no one's ever stood for me in that way before. Now, that wasn't a lot of work on my part, right? All I was doing is seeing the version of herself that she committed to be and holding her to that. But there was a moment where she really wanted to dislike me. And she really wanted me to buy into the reason that she can't. Okay. She's a great client because it was a short time period. But I want to share, this not only happens for my clients, this happens for me as well. So last year I hired a new coach and started working with this new coach. And there was a place where she was interacting with me, with my higher version of me and who I knew I wanted myself to be. And I really wanted her to understand the version of me of where I came from. And it was a particular situation. And truly, I don't even remember all the details of it. But what I remember is having this internal battle with my ego in that moment. So I'm on the call and my ego wanted to explain and justify and rationalize right where I was. And I wanted her to be in it with me, to understand all the details of where I was. But it really wasn't relevant. Like my higher self knows, it really wasn't relevant to the conversation or where we wanted to be. It just seemed relevant for me to explain all of the details. And my ego got triggered and it wanted to dig in its heels and be like, but no, and F you. And, like that's what my ego is thinking in the back of my mind. This isn't going to work. And I was totally in resistance to this way, right? Because when we're in a place where we're letting go of an old truth or an old pattern that seemed real for us, that we needed to be this way in order to survive. And we're stepping into a whole new alignment, a whole new energy, which is, the core of transformation. It's going to feel really unsafe. Our ego feels better if we're in the old energy because it's comfortable and familiar. And our ego sometimes can't even comprehend the new energy. It's so foreign. And so it can get mad, it can get upset. All of these things can happen. And it can happen for me, it can happen for anyone at any level. So being aware of that is really important. But when you are really being a powerful stand for someone's highest version of themselves, and this isn't pretending to like know what's best for them or give them advice or anything like that. This is an energetic thing. Being a stand for the highest version of who they are, they might not like it in the moment. In fact, they're very likely to have moments of love-hate. They're very likely to have moments where their ego is trying to find fault in you and trying to find fault in the process and all of that. Because if their ego can find a way to make you wrong and make themselves right, then they can stay where they are and stay safe. And they can chalk it up to one more thing that didn't work or, whatever. But the ego will put up a bit of a fight. So if you, as the retreat leader, as the coach, know this, you can hold your calm, zen, loving, compassionate space for them while their ego fights and kicks and screams, and it can be totally okay. I'll share another story about why this is so important. And this happened to occur in an individual conversation. And then I'll share a story in a minute about what happens when this goes on at a live retreat. So I was working with this client, and she was in her 50s. She actually, this was before I was focused on retreats, but she had led a retreat. She had done a workshop. She'd done a variety of things. And she was working on creating packages and raising her pricing and things like that in the way she worked. But she was also working on showing up in a really powerful way, actually showing up as a powerful retreat coach, which I'm going to teach some tips for that in just a minute. But she was really doing the work that I'm talking about now. So it's really perfect. So we had a conversation, and I called her out on something and held her to her truth, to what she had said she wanted, that her ego was now trying to backtrack on, right? And so I was holding her to that, and she was getting really frustrated. And she ended up saying, F you, and hanging up on me. She got so mad, right? I don't know if it was F you or F off, but she told me that on the phone and hung up. Okay. Now I want you to think about, how would that be for you? If one of your clients who you love, I love this woman, I still love this woman, we have a great relationship today, and she just said F off. She's this nice, sweet, loving, amazing ball of love who's telling me to fuck off, right? So for a moment, I was like, whoa, something's wrong. Did I do something wrong? Like my ego kicked in and went, shoot, do I need to fix this? And then I took a breath, because I am very practiced. Now I wouldn't be triggered, but I was a little triggered. This was several years ago. But I took a few breaths, and I really got present to what I know to be true, which is all is always unfolding perfectly for the greatest and highest good. And so I asked myself, okay, if this is true, why is this showing up? What is that about? And I really just trusted. And what my intuition said in that moment was that it was showing up in the greatest and highest good for this client, because part of her story was she wasn't allowed to be angry. She was the fixer. She was the caretaker in her family. She was the one who always, was the peacemaker. And there was never, starting as a kid, right? She was taking care of things at a young age. And so there was never space for her to authentically express her emotions of anger. She'd never expressed it. She'd never talked back to someone. She'd never, ever, told someone to F off. Come to find out, the next time we talked, she eventually actually called and apologized. And she updated me that she had also told her husband where to go in the same language. And that it was the first time she'd ever stood up to him. And he's a great guy and all of that. But she had been going along to get along for many, many years. She'd never allowed herself to express her true feelings in her marriage. And doing that shook up her marriage in the best possible way. And in that process, because in the conversation with me, she was safe to be able to express how she felt, and we had a real conversation for truth. Now she could go out and in her relationship with her husband, and it wasn't pretty in the moment. It wasn't, all bundled up in roses and all of that. It was, again, fuck you. She was able to express herself, and all of a sudden it was like, whew, and she expressed herself in a couple other conversations as well. And all of that programming of it's not safe to say what I think. I can't ever be angry. I have to smile and make peace. I have to hold it all together. All of those rules that were stored in her body and her physical system just went whoosh. And she was able to shed that. And it changed her life forever. So we don't necessarily want to create an environment where clients are always telling us where to go. That's not necessarily great. However, I'm a huge believer in being a very powerful space for your clients to speak truth. Even if it feels uncomfortable, sometimes you may be the only person that they've ever, or person of authority, right? Because you're in authority or perceived authority in that situation. You might be the only person they've ever challenged in authority. They might be working their muscle at that to be able to go out and change the world in their area of expertise. And so you need to be big enough and powerful enough, and I'll give you my definition of power, to be able to hold that for them and to be able to respond with your own boundaries and have clear boundaries and clear expectations of them without getting triggered, and still be able to be loving and compassionate to them. So now I forgot what I was going to share in just a moment. But here is my next question. What happens if you're in a live retreat and someone gets triggered like this? If you're in a live retreat and someone is, challenging you, or simply like trying to avoid answering your question or not doing what you want them to do, right? Which is, part of your commitment to them as their guide is to help them break through. It's not that you want everybody to do what you want them to do. That would be weird, right? You're not trying to control it, but you're really a stand for their breakthrough. So, this can show up in very simple ways of someone who is continually questioning you in a way that you can tell they're trying to, diminish the work or put a negative energy into the space. It can show up in that way. Or it can show up in them like continuing to spin and not get a result, right? So a lot of times when we are on the verge of a breakthrough, what our ego will do is it gets what I call slippery, and it starts to confound you or confound the coach with rationalization and thinking and trying to keep you from keeping a train of thought. So one simple way that someone's ego can do this in a retreat, that happens a lot, is you might ask them a question and they will give you an answer that has nothing to do with the question. They won't actually answer the question. You'll ask them a question and they'll instead start explaining something totally different. This happens all the time, okay? And it's not purposeful. It's not like they're consciously going, ooh, let me divert you and mess you up. No, it's their subconscious or ego mind going, oh, if I just say, look over here, maybe you'll forget that question that is really hard for me to answer because I've never really said what I want before, or I've never really considered that in that way before. So the ego will try to throw you off by not answering the question. So, one thing to know is you want to make sure as you're leading your retreat that people are actually answering the questions you ask. Okay. So if they go in another direction, you can say, okay, got that. And this was the question I asked. right? And if they keep doing that, then you can come back and say, isn't it interesting? Do you notice that I keep asking you this question, but rather than answering it, you keep, telling me about this over here. I'm kind of curious about that. Why do you think that might be? So you don't want to skip over this, okay? And allow, because then you're not being powerful in the room. You're allowing, their ego to run your retreat. So, and this isn't about like fighting for control or being in charge or anything like that, right? It's totally cool that you don't have total control of everything. That's amazing. And you really want their ego to know, hey, like if I'm a participant, I can say, hey, ego, you don't have to run the show here because so-and-so's got it, right? That's what that's saying. When you're really powerful in front of the room, it's signaling to the people in the room that their ego can take a break, that they're safe. They're being held in this safe container and their ego can take a break. And so that's one clear signal of actually holding people to answer the questions you ask them. That makes their ego go, oh, okay, I don't have to be in charge here. In fact, I'm not in charge here. It's super helpful. So I remember what I was going to share, which is my definition of powerful. So since we're talking about being a powerful retreat coach and that not always being liked, let me share my definition of power. So my definition of power is being free to speak your authentic truth. Being free to be your authentic self, speak your core truth, and accept what comes. That's true power. So a powerful retreat leader is not afraid to speak the truth, which is, you didn't answer my question, and I usually say it like that with like a playful tone, depending on the person. You're not being confrontational about it, but you're speaking your truth, or sometimes it might look like, they're giving you a whole story of an answer, and it might look like, I don't believe you. I know it feels like that's true, but I think there's something deeper. So don't be afraid to challenge when the ego is giving a response. Okay? So let's look at, what happens if you're in a live retreat and someone needs hard feedback and everybody is watching. First of all, this is part of why retreats are so powerful, because if you can hold someone who needs some challenging feedback in a place of love and compassion and give them very direct feedback, most people, the reason that they're stuck in the first place is because they grew up with some kind of rule that wasn't acceptable. Right? They're busy being polite. They're busy looking smart. They're busy trying to save face. They're busy trying to do all the things that their parents or teachers or society taught them that they had to do to survive life. And being really clear and authentic and loving and direct is something a lot of people haven't experienced before. So if you can be that as the retreat leader, it opens something up in terms of the possibility of transformation for so many people. So this is why it's so important. And it's also very important for you to show that you're holding the integrity of the group and the experience. So if there are people, in your group who are really not committed to the transformation, and you don't at some level call that out or help them see that or let the room know that people are going to start to feel like it's not safe. So a lot of times people feel like the best way to create a safe space is to allow everything and agree with everything, and right? But actually the best way to create a safe space is to have these healthy boundaries where it's not like just everything goes. So one example that I like to share, I had a retreat once where it was clear one of the participants really wasn't committed to transformation. Some part of them maybe was that had them register, but a bigger part of them was actually committed to proving that it didn't work. Now, I could tell this by the way the questions that this person answered over time, over the first day and a half, the way they showed up in exercises and with their group and all of that. And also the questions that they asked. There were a lot of questions related to money and charging for coaching. And I could get a really clear sense, and I think they actually shared really specifically that they'd invested in different things and that they had an opinion that people were just wanting their money and that they were never going to really make a change. So what I saw in that was actually, first of all, I can't allow it to be okay for that type of conversation and that type of energy to be happening in my retreat room, because, that doubt can really spread. The second thing I saw was a real opportunity for this person to have faith in humanity and in me, but not just in me, but in the collective of humanity. And so what I did is I offered that person a refund. And I said, you have a choice. Like, if you want to stay, I really need you to be committed to your own result. And that would look like showing up in a different way. And I gave some examples. Or maybe like what you really want is to not spend this money and you really want to leave. And so I wrote a check for them to take their full refund of their money back, no questions asked, and leave. And they made the choice to take the refund and leave. It was such a powerful healing, I think, for that person. That person is still in my life. I love that person in my circle, right? And I think it was very healing for the others in the room to see me model that integrity. I got lots of feedback about that from people, that they really got a lot from that. And it just kept the integrity of the container. Now, truthfully, I felt nervous making that decision because it could have been very unpopular. But I knew that it was important for me to hold that integrity of the space. So a powerful retreat coach is not always liked. In that moment, I don't think that person had a particular, loving feeling toward me. At some level, maybe their soul was grateful to get the money back and all of that. But, this work of holding space for transformation, it really does require a depth of understanding of how humans work and a huge commitment to your integrity and your boundaries. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So how do you decide how to handle scenarios in a live retreat when people are watching, right? When people are learning from each other and creating their own transformation based on the energy in the space. So the first thing that I want you to do, if you haven't yet watched or listened to episode 3, I want you to do that. Episode 3 is about understanding how to deliver transformation. And in that, I teach the anatomy of a transformation. And there's a key step in the anatomy of a transformation, which is commitment. And when someone is committed to making their shift, the next step is surrender. So they surrender to this awareness that my old way hasn't been working, and I'm open to a new way. I'm open to receiving a new truth. But someone won't be willing to surrender to hearing a new truth until, and this isn't a truth you're giving them, they're creating it, right? They're becoming open to it. Spirit is giving it to them, in my opinion. But they're not going to be open to hearing the new truth if they haven't committed. So you really want to ensure that people are committed. If someone keeps circling around and not moving forward for extended periods of time, they may not be committed. If someone is challenging you, they may not be committed. So there are exercises I teach in my Retreat and Grow Rich program that help you get clear about if someone's committed and help that person get clear about if they're committed. That's at retreatandgrowrich.com/course if you're into that. If they're not committed, you want to remember to give your substance where it can do most good. So if someone's not committed to their transformation and they're in resistance, which is okay. Remember, I get in resistance also, but their higher self isn't there being willing to surrender, which is what happened in my situation with my coach, where even though everything in me wanted to resist, there was this higher self that went, you're not committed to this resistance. You're committed to something different. You're committed to a different result. So if someone is not committed to a different result, you got to remember, give your substance where it can do most good. Don't try to pour into someone and get them to get the result that they're not prepared to get. So that may look like having them leave, but it doesn't have to. It might look like doing this exercise to help them see they're not committed and say, you know what, I don't think you're committed to actually making this change. And that's totally okay. You don't have to. I love you. You don't have to make this change. I don't think you're committed. So why don't you just own that that's where you are right now and really be okay with that? And a lot of times just that validation of where they are frees them up to start to get committed to making the change, right? So that can be where the transformation happens, is actually where you really let go of your desire for them to have that transformation. The second piece of advice I have when you're in a group and stuff comes up like this is you want to come from an energy of, this is what it looks like when we're winning. This is what it looks like when we're winning. So in episode 4, I talk about the 7 levels of energy. This is level 6 energy. A lot of times when people are in resistance, they're in level 2 or 3. If you're at level 6, even if they're at 2 or 3, they won't hook you in there, because you're holding this truth that this is exactly what it looks like when we're winning. That's the truth I had to hold when the client told me off and hung up on me. This is what winning looks like for her. This is a part of the process, and I'm totally okay. I totally trust it. The more, by the way, that you practice, this is what it looks like when I'm winning in your life, in every situation in your life, the easier it will be to be really powerful as a retreat leader, because you won't get triggered, right? Because you just know, okay, this didn't go how I thought it would, but this is clearly what's needed. This is clearly what it looks like when I'm winning. I once held a retreat. This is the one time I had a retreat at a venue that really didn't work for me. I didn't like the feeling in the lobby. I didn't like the staff. I didn't like the meeting room. The energy in the city was weird. Like, I was concerned, and I'm always rolling with it, right? So I had to stop and go, okay, if this is what it looks like when I'm winning, why are we here right now? Why has this group come to this city and this hotel? And what is the breakthrough available in this experience that doesn't feel like how I would want it to, right? There's growth here. And there was huge breakthrough in holding love in the face of any energy that the whole group had as a result of that. So the more you practice that in your life, the easier it will be to practice that in your retreat. That includes if your partner or spouse or family member, is behaving in a way that you think is wrong, right? Because those are the people who can trigger us the most. For you to be able to stop and go, what if this is what it looks like when I'm winning, right? Why is this person in my life giving me this thing to learn through? Okay. Great. So then the third and final piece that I want to share about how to be a powerful retreat leader and be prepared to handle these things is to practice the principles of healthy compassion. So healthy compassion is a phrase I've coined, and it's a teaching I've developed. I'm sure it will be the topic of a future podcast. But I want to highlight there's 10 principles of healthy compassion. I'm not going to go through all of them. But healthy compassion is really holding a space of compassion for another, being able to feel your feelings of compassion and empathy for that person without getting hooked into their situation, and with continuing to hold a healthy boundary for you emotionally and energetically. So I'm going to share just a couple of the principles that will help as a powerful retreat leader. The first is this: I see others as whole and complete and capable of handling their own situation. my listening of them, or the way I view them or hear them, my filter for them, supports the belief in their wholeness. What that means is you're not going to get bought into something's wrong with them and they're broken. The moment you get bought into that, now you're in their story and you're trying to fix whatever's going on with them. And now you're not holding that space of the greatest and highest good for them. So I see others as whole and complete and capable of handling their own situation. So you're not a fixer. You can hold the vision for them being totally powerful. So the second principle of healthy compassion I want to highlight is I'm willing to set healthy boundaries with others, even when they may not like it or they may not like me. It may not feel good for them or they may not like me. You've got to be okay setting these boundaries. And just as an example, in a retreat, for me on a break, I don't really like to socialize on breaks at a retreat. I like to care for and nurture myself on breaks, maybe go to my room or duck away and restore my energy. And that's a boundary that works for me. It doesn't have to be that way for everyone. But, people might not like that. They might want to pull you aside on a break and want, to get your extra help and all of that. And for me, that's a boundary that I like to hold. And I hold it energetically, so I don't invite that in. It's very rare that someone, wants to violate that boundary because it's really clear for me. The old me would have been so terrified that people would think I was rude or standoffish or arrogant or whatever and not like me. But I've learned that I've got to take care of and nurture myself, which leads me to the next principle of healthy compassion, which is I nourish and nurture myself so that I can make healthy, aligned decisions about how I will engage with others. So if you're coming in depleted, if you're not caring for yourself, giving yourself the time and space to really be nurtured and nourished, you might get hooked more easily, right? If you think about it, we tend to get in arguments more easily if we're tired, for example. So as a part of how you live your life, not just during the retreat, but how you live your life, you want to be nourishing and nurturing yourself so that you're able to really hear your truth and speak it with love and compassion. If we are depleted, we won't hold compassion when we speak our truth, right? We'll just be annoyed, like, why are you bothering me? Or you should be faster or whatever. We're just easier to get hooked or feel like, oh, I have to prove that I'm a really great coach, so I have to fix you. And now all of a sudden you're not holding healthy compassion, you're holding fixing energy. So nourishing and nurturing yourself is super important to being a powerful retreat leader. The last one I want to share about is this has to do, it's actually two different principles that are related. It has to do with consent. So I trust my inner knowing I trust my inner knowing about when my participation and contribution is divinely welcomed and in service of the greater good. And the second piece, the second one that goes along with that is I clarify my intention to support another and seek consent from them before providing it. So this is really about tuning in to your intuition to really get a sense of, is it in the greatest and highest good to go there with this person now? As an example, you might teach some version of our word creates our world, or the language we use is really important to the outcome we create. In a retreat, a lot of times this is a great place where you can notice if someone's language is aligned with their goal or if it's off. And a lot of times I'll choose to correct, not from a fixing place, but suggest another language if someone is speaking in a way that isn't going to get them to their goal, right? Isn't in alignment. So I might say, what if you thought about it this way? Or how about if we rephrase that like this? Sometimes that's just a perfect contribution. It sparks an aha. And other times you just want to let it go. Like the person isn't in a place to receive that, or maybe it doesn't further the conversation in the room. So This is where you want to trust your inner knowing about whether to address something or whether to let it go. And it's really about, is it in service of the greater good? You're not going to address all the things in one retreat. It's not possible. So you want to be holding the space for each person to have that one clear breakthrough that they came for. And this is where that nourishing yourself and being tuned into your inner knowing is so important. And then the second piece around that goes hand in hand is seeking consent before providing input. Now, if someone's come to your retreat, they've paid you for the outcome that you've marketed, they're giving you an implied consent to coach them, right? Or to guide them or whatever. So this isn't like you have to get permission for everything, right? However, if someone is in that place where they're grappling with their ego and their ego might be wanting to resist the transformation, they might be kind of giving you vibes that they're not liking you right now or whatever, you can check in and you can say, I'm noticing a pattern here and I'm just curious, do I have your permission to share about that? Or it could be, hey, are you really interested in breaking through this? Because the way you're showing up right now, I'm not sure. And I just want to check before we go there. And you can do that in a way that's very clear. It's very compassionate. You're not in judgment of how they're being or anything like that. You're not triggered, but you're really having them make a clear choice that they're in for the breakthrough. You're having them make a clear choice that they want what could be that tough love, right? Or that input that they may not temporarily like. So asking for and getting consent is really getting their commitment to wanting to go there with you. Now, they may have come into the retreat with a certain commitment to an outcome and they think they're ready for it. But in the moment when it's time to make that change, remember the ego gets nervous and goes, no, I want my old ways. I want to stay the same. No. And so you want to just lovingly point that out and give them the choice. And I have people, this happens, fairly frequently where people choose, no, I don't want to go there. And then they'll come back and go, okay, I'm ready now. They just needed some time to sit with it and get ready to make that shift. So as you may know, this is a lot of things to balance in one retreat. The more you're practicing those principles and really studying what it takes to be a powerful retreat leader and being that in your life, the easier and more effortless and seamless that will be. If you have questions for us or want to study with us further on how to be this powerful retreat leader in front of the room, email my team, support@alignedentrepreneurs.com. I hope this has been valuable and you're taking away just a little bit higher commitment to your own power in the way you run your business and really the way you show up in your life. If you've gotten a great nugget, I'd love to hear. This is Darla Ledoux of Aligned Entrepreneurs with this episode of Retreat and Grow Rich. Have an amazing day and we'll see you soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Retreat and Grow Rich, the podcast. If so, please share your experience and spread the word. Also, please subscribe over on iTunes and leave us a fabulous review. It makes a big difference in helping to get the word out. And you can join me in my mission to normalize transformation on the planet, one intimate retreat at a time. You can find show notes from this and all of our episodes over at alignedentrepreneurs.com/podcast. If you'd like to understand the inner workings of my retreat-based business model and build your confidence in your retreat dreams, you can grab my book, Retreat and Grow Rich, over on Amazon. It's the entrepreneur's guide to powerful, profitable retreats. If you've been wanting to incorporate transformational retreats into your fabulous business model, but you're not quite sure where to start, hop on over to retreatleaderquiz.com. In this short 10-question quiz, you will receive your personalized results one of 6 retreat leader archetypes that will show you what your strengths are as a retreat leader, the pitfalls to look out for, and even give you a sample agenda that you can take and make your own. Again, that's at retreatleaderquiz.com.